When my daughter-in-law told me, "You've had your time with him," I didn't cry. I just stood there, holding the edge of the kitchen counter, as her words settled in the air like dust after something breaks. The house was quiet, except for the slow ticking of the wall clock. My son was at work. The sunlight was slipping through the window, warm and golden, but it felt cold somehow. She stood in front of me, arms folded. Not angry, just firm, like someone drawing a line in the sand. "I think it's time you moved out," she said. "You've had your time with him, and now, it's our time." For a moment I didn't even understand what she meant. My mind couldn't catch up. I smiled, and not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know what else to do. Sometimes when your heart breaks quietly, your face forgets how to show it. I looked at her. She looked so young, so sure of herself. Maybe I was like that once. Maybe every woman is before life softens her edges. I tried to keep my voice calm. "I didn't mean to be in your way," I whispered. She didn't answer. She just looked past me, like the conversation was already over. In the silence that followed, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the chirp of a bird outside. Everything ordinary, and yet everything had changed. I walked back to my small room at the end of the hallway. My son had painted those walls himself when we first bought the house. Pale blue, his favorite color back then. I still remember his laughter as the paint splashed on his shirt. Now that same blue looked faded, tired, like me. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the window. Outside, the wind was gentle, brushing against the curtains. It felt like the world was telling me to breathe. I told myself not to cry. Not because I was strong, but because I was afraid if I started I wouldn't be able to stop. So I folded my hands in my lap and waited for the sound of his car in the driveway. I didn't know what I'd say when he came home. Maybe I wouldn't say anything at all. Maybe silence would say enough. I still remember the day my son was born. The sky outside the hospital window was gray, and there was a soft drizzle, the kind that smells like clean earth. I was tired, my hair stuck to my face, but when the nurse placed him in my arms, everything in the world became still. He was so small, so quiet. His eyes were barely open, but when he looked up at me, I felt something I had never felt before. A kind of love that doesn't shout or sparkle. It just breathes. From that day, it was just him and me. His father passed away when he was only 2. It wasn't sudden, but even when you know what's coming, you're never really ready. I was 27. I didn't know how to raise a child alone. I didn't have much, just a little house, a few part-time jobs, and a heart that refused to give up. Every morning, I'd wake before sunrise, pack his lunch, iron his tiny school uniform, and whisper, "You'll do great today, my love." He'd nod, rubbing his sleepy eyes, and say, "You too, Mama." Those were the words that carried me through everything. We didn't have much money, but we had laughter. On Friday nights, we'd sit at the kitchen table with peanut butter sandwiches and old board games. Sometimes we'd draw silly faces on napkins and pretend they were guests at our fancy dinner. He grew up gentle, thoughtful, the kind of boy who'd pick up a fallen bird's nest and put it back on the branch. He always said he didn't like seeing things fall apart, and I think that's what made me proudest, that softness in him. When he went to college, I cried for 3 days straight. Not because I didn't want him to go, but because I knew life was beginning to take him somewhere I couldn't follow. He called every evening. "Did you eat, Mom?" he'd ask, before telling me about his classes, his professors, his friends. His voice always sounded tired but happy. That was enough for me. Then one winter he came home for the holidays and with a young woman. Her name was Emily. She had kind eyes and a nervous smile. She offered to help me set the table, and though I said no, she insisted. "I want to learn the way you do it," she said, and I remember thinking, maybe she'll take care of him the way I did. That night we had dinner together, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and my son's favorite, peach pie. He held her hand as we talked, and there was a light in his eyes I hadn't seen before. After they left that evening to meet his friends, I stood at the sink washing dishes. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and laughter, and I whispered to myself, "He's happy." It should have been enough, but when love changes form, it always leaves a shadow, not because it disappears, but because it stretches to fit new places. Months later, he called me and said, "Mom, I want you to meet Emily's parents." I smiled, even though my hands trembled. "So it's serious?" He laughed softly. I think she's the one. When they got married, it was a small ceremony in a white garden. She looked beautiful and he looked proud. I stood there watching him place the ring on her finger and thought, he's not my little boy anymore. After the wedding, they invited me to move in with them. We don't want you to be alone, he said. Emily nodded, smiling. It'll be nice having family around. I was hesitant at first. I didn't want to intrude, but he insisted. It's just until we get settled, he promised. So I packed a few boxes, mostly photo frames, a couple of books and my favorite teapot, and left the house that had held my whole life. When I arrived, their home was bright and modern, all whites and grays, not a thing out of place. It didn't feel like the old house where every wall had a memory, but it was warm enough. The first few weeks were nice. We had dinners together, talked about their work, watched movies on weekends. Emily would sometimes ask for my recipes, and I'd show her how to knead dough for pie crust or season chicken the way my mother taught me. But there were moments, small, quiet ones, when I'd catch her watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Not dislike exactly, but a kind of distance. Once when I folded their laundry, she said softly, "You don't have to do that, you know." I smiled. "I don't mind. I want to make sure this feels like our space," she added quickly, eyes on the floor. I nodded. Of course. That night I sat in my room listening to their laughter from the living room. It wasn't jealousy. It was just emptiness. Like I'd been moved a few steps away from something I used to hold close. Still, I told myself it was natural. Every new family needs space. Every mother must learn to stand a little further back. The trouble is, you never realize how far back you've gone, until one day you can't hear the laughter anymore. It began slowly, like a soft shadow stretching across the floor, quiet, gentle, but impossible to ignore. At first, it was little things. My son would come home late, tired from work, and head straight to his room. He'd smile when he saw me, but it was a tired smile, the kind you give when your heart is somewhere else. "Long day?" I'd ask. "Yeah," he'd sigh, loosening his tie. "Just a lot on my plate." I'd make him tea the way I always did, a pinch of cardamom, a spoon of honey. But sometimes he wouldn't even finish it. He'd thank me, kiss my forehead, and disappear behind the bedroom door. At first, I told myself it was just work. Everyone gets busy, but mothers notice what others miss. The heaviness in the eyes, the way footsteps sound different when something's wrong. Emily was polite, always. She'd ask how I was, if I needed anything from the store, or if I wanted to watch something with her, but her kindness had a rhythm to it, practiced, measured, like she was trying to keep a balance without really sharing the weight. One morning I made breakfast for everyone, pancakes, eggs, and bacon. The table looked full like old times. When they came downstairs, she smiled but said softly, "Oh, we were actually planning to grab brunch with friends today." I froze for a moment. "Oh, I didn't know." "I think he mentioned it last night," she said, glancing at him. He looked guilty, like a boy caught between two voices. "Sorry, Mom, it was last minute." I nodded. "That's all right. Go on." He hesitated. "You sure?" "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "Food tastes better fresh. I'll just eat later." When they left, the house felt quiet again. The smell of pancakes filled the air, but somehow even that felt lonely. I wrapped the food in foil, set it aside, and sat at the table. The clock ticked in the background. Sometimes silence can sound louder than any argument. Days passed like that, each one taking something small with it. He started calling her M, the way he used to call me Ma. A small thing, maybe, but I noticed. She began rearranging the house. New curtains, different plates, moving the family photos to a smaller shelf. She didn't do it unkindly, just confidently, as if to make room for their life. One evening I came home from the grocery store to find my things from the kitchen moved to a box. My favorite teacup, the old spice jars, even the little embroidered cloth I used on the counter. Emily was there, standing by the stove. "I just thought we'd make things look cleaner," she said. I wanted to go for a simpler look. I nodded, though my throat tightened. "Of course." "It's still your kitchen, too," she added quickly. "I just like everything to match." That night I made tea in a plain white cup. It tasted the same, but somehow it didn't feel like mine anymore. Winter came quietly that year. The first snow fell one Sunday morning while they were still asleep. I watched it from the porch, the world turning white and still. I thought about the years when my son would wake up early just to help me shovel the driveway. He'd always make faces, pretending to hate it, but he never let me do it alone. Now, as I watched the snow pile up, I saw him pull out of the driveway in his car. Emily sat beside him, wrapped in a scarf, smiling. I waved from the porch. He didn't see me. That was the morning I realized. Love doesn't leave all at once. It fades in tiny, invisible ways until you wake up and can't remember when it stopped being seen. There were nights when I'd hear them laugh behind their closed door. Soft laughter muffled by walls. I'd smile even as my eyes filled with tears. Because that's what mothers do. We love quietly even when no one is looking back. Sometimes I'd cook dinner and leave it on the stove before they came home. Some nights it stayed untouched. We already ate, he'd say. Sorry, Mom. Maybe tomorrow. After a while, I stopped cooking for 3. I began spending more time in my room, reading, knitting, watching the evening light fade across the window. My world became smaller, quieter. Once I heard Emily on the phone with a friend. She didn't know I was nearby. She's sweet, she said, but it's hard. I feel like we can't really start our life while she's here. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. I stood frozen in the hallway, every word landing like a slow heartbeat. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about how love can turn heavy even when it starts with kindness. A few weeks later, she suggested they convert the spare room into an office. We could move your things to the smaller room upstairs, she said. I nodded. Whatever you think works best. My son hesitated. Mom, you're okay with that? I'm fine, I said. You both need the space. But when I packed my things, I paused at the photo of the 3 of us on their wedding day. I held it for a long time before putting it in a drawer. The new room was smaller, colder. The window faced the back alley instead of the garden. I tried to make it cozy. A small lamp, a blanket, a vase with plastic flowers. But it didn't feel like home. It felt like a waiting room for someone who no longer had a destination. There were still good days. We'd have dinner together sometimes, laugh about something on TV or talk about the weather. But even in those moments, there was something fragile beneath the laughter, like glass under pressure. Once he asked if I was happy living with them. I smiled, of course. Why wouldn't I be? He nodded, relieved, not seeing the way my fingers gripped the edge of the chair. Because what could I say? That I missed the way he used to talk to me? That I felt like a guest in a home that used to be full of my love? Mothers don't say those things. We swallow them, hoping they'll fade with time. The real distance started when they began making plans, trips, house renovations, future dreams. They'd sit together on the couch, scrolling through vacation spots, talking about next year and someday, and I'd listen from the corner, smiling. Once, she said, maybe when we have kids, we'll need more room, he laughed. Mom will love being around them, but she didn't smile. She just said softly, we'll see. It was such a small thing, but I heard it, and for the first time I wondered if there would even be a place for me in that future. A few months later it happened. It wasn't dramatic. No yelling, no tears, just quiet truth spoken in a calm voice that changed everything. We were in the kitchen. She was washing dishes. I was drying them. The late afternoon light was spilling through the window, golden and kind. She paused, her hand still in the sink. I hope you don't take this the wrong way, she began, but I think it's time we start having our own space. I looked at her, unsure. What do you mean? She turned, her voice steady. You've had your time with him. Now it's our time. There it was. Simple, direct, final. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They just sank in quietly, like rain into the earth. I nodded slowly, my hands trembling just a little. I see. I hope you understand, she said. It's not that I don't care about you. I understand, I whispered. And I did. Not with my mind, but with the part of my heart that already knew this day would come. When my son came home that evening, I didn't say a word. I smiled when he walked in, asked how work was, and served him dinner like nothing had changed. Because sometimes love doesn't fight, it just folds itself quietly and steps aside. That night, I lay in bed and watched the shadows move across the ceiling. The house was quiet again. The same silence that once comforted me now felt like it was swallowing me whole. And for the first time in years, I whispered to myself, maybe it's time. The morning after she said it, I woke before sunrise. The house was still dark, except for a soft glow from the streetlight spilling through my window. I sat up slowly, listening to the quiet, the kind of silence that feels like it's waiting for something to end. I knew I had to leave. Not because she told me to, but because I understood what she meant. There's a time in every mother's life when love must learn to let go, even when every part of you wants to hold on. I got up and started packing my things. Not in a rush, not in anger, just calm, steady motions. The sound of the zipper on my old suitcase felt loud in the stillness. I folded my clothes neatly one by one. I took down the few pictures from the shelf, my son's first school photo, our trip to the lake, his graduation day. I touched each frame gently before wrapping it in a towel and placing it in the bag. When I picked up the wedding photo, I paused. He looked so happy that day, standing beside her. His hand on hers, his smile easy and full. I traced his face with my finger and whispered, "You did it, my love. You built your life." And in that moment I realized, that was all I ever wanted. By the time the sun rose, I had packed everything that was truly mine. Just one suitcase, a small bag, and a heart full of memories. I went to the kitchen and made coffee the way I always did. The aroma filled the air, warm and familiar. I poured a cup for myself and sat at the table. The chairs were still slightly misaligned, the way he used to leave them after breakfast. The plant by the window leaned toward the light. The sound of birds drifted in from outside. Everything looked normal, but I knew it wasn't. I sat there quietly, hands wrapped around my cup, and thought about how strange it is that life doesn't pause for heartbreak. The world keeps turning. The coffee still steams. The sun still rises. Only the heart knows something has shifted. Emily came downstairs around 8. She looked surprised to see me awake and dressed. "Good morning," she said cautiously. "Morning," I replied. Her eyes fell on the suitcase by the door. She hesitated. "You're leaving?" I nodded. "Yes, I think it's time." She bit her lip, looking unsure. "I didn't mean to—" I raised a hand gently. "You didn't have to." I understood. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes softening. Maybe she saw the tiredness in mine, or maybe she felt a kind of guilt she didn't know how to name. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said quietly. "I know," I whispered. "You just wanted your life." There was no bitterness in my voice, just truth. She stood there silently, then nodded and walked to the counter, pretending to busy herself with the kettle, but I could see her hands trembling slightly. When my son came down a little later, he looked confused at first. "Mom, what's with the suitcase?" I smiled. "I'm going home," he frowned. "Home? Mom, this is your home." I shook my head softly. "It was, but now it's yours." He looked between me and Emily. She said nothing, just kept her eyes down. "Did something happen?" he asked. "No," I said. "Nothing happened. Sometimes things don't need to happen for us to understand." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Mom, you don't have to go." "Emily didn't mean anything," I interrupted gently. "She didn't say anything wrong. She just said what was true." He stared at me, helpless like a child again. For a moment I saw the boy he used to be, the one who held my hand when crossing the street, the one who cried when he broke his toy, the one who once promised he'd never leave me alone. "Where will you go?" he asked quietly. I smiled faintly. "I still have the old house. It needs some dusting, but it's still standing." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "At least let me help you move." "I'll take the day off." "No," I said softly. "You stay. You have things to do. I'll manage." He looked like he wanted to argue, but I placed my hand on his arm. "It's all right, my love. You don't have to choose between us. Just be happy." His eyes glistened. "You make it sound like you're not coming back." I smiled again, the kind that hides 1,000 emotions. "Maybe not to this house, but I'll always be around." When I stepped outside, the air was crisp and cool. The morning sun was bright and the world smelled like new beginnings. He carried my suitcase to the car. Emily followed behind, silent, her arms folded tightly. "Call me when you get there," he said. "I will," I promised. I looked at him one last time. Really looked. The lines of his face, the way his hair curled slightly at the neck, the tired kindness in his eyes. "You've done well," I said softly. "You've built a good life," he swallowed hard. "Because of you," I shook my head. "No, my dear, because of you." Then I opened the car door, took one last breath, and drove away. The road home felt longer than I remembered. The trees looked older, the signs faded. I drove slowly, letting the memories play like a quiet film in my mind. His first bicycle ride, his graduation, his wedding. Every mile felt like another thread gently untangling. When I finally reached the old house, it looked smaller than before. The paint was chipped, the garden overgrown, but it was still home. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of dust and old wood. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating tiny particles floating in the air, like the ghosts of all the laughter that once filled the place. I set my suitcase down and walked to the kitchen. The same cracked tiles, the same uneven cabinet door. I touched the counter and felt a wave of peace, the kind that comes when you stop fighting what's already gone. I filled the kettle, made myself a cup of tea, and sat at the old table. The chair creaked beneath me, familiar and forgiving. It was quiet. But this time the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like rest. That evening the phone rang. It was my son. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "Don't worry. I didn't want you to feel pushed out." I smiled softly, though he couldn't see it. "You didn't push me out, sweetheart. Life just moved forward, that's all." He was silent for a moment. Then he said, "It feels wrong without you here." "It'll feel right soon," I whispered. "You'll see." We talked for a few minutes about small things. The weather, his work, the garden. When we hung up, I sat there staring at the quiet phone, feeling both full and hollow at once. Sometimes love isn't about staying. Sometimes it's about knowing when your presence starts to hold someone back. The next few weeks passed gently. I cleaned the house, repainted the walls, planted flowers in the garden. Each day felt a little lighter. But at night I still found myself looking at the empty chair across the table, half expecting him to walk in with his boyish grin and say, "Mom, you made tea without me?" He never did. And that's okay. One afternoon, as I was watering the plants, I saw a small envelope in the mailbox. It was from Emily. The handwriting was neat, careful. Inside there was a short note. "Thank you for understanding more than I deserved. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just didn't know how to share him. I hope one day I'll have the grace you showed me. Emily." I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. Not as forgiveness, but as something gentler. Closure. That night, as the rain tapped softly on the windows, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the old radio. I thought about how love changes over time, how it stretches, reshapes, sometimes even leaves. But maybe that's what it means to love fully, to give without expecting, to hold without clinging, and to walk away quietly when your part of the story is done. I didn't cry. I just sat there listening to the rain. It sounded like peace. It's been 3 months since I came back home. 3 months of mornings that begin with birdsong and end with silence. At first, the quiet felt heavy, like a blanket that smothers instead of comforts. But now I've learned to let it breathe. I open the windows every morning, let the fresh air in, and talk to the house like an old friend who's been waiting for me. The garden has started to bloom again. The roses I planted years ago are coming back to life. I water them slowly, watching the way the sunlight touches each petal. There's something sacred about small routines. They remind you that even after heartbreak, life doesn't stop growing. I've fallen into a gentle rhythm here. I wake early, make myself a cup of tea, and sit on the porch. Sometimes the neighbors wave when they pass by. Sometimes they don't. Either way, it's all right. After breakfast, I walk to the small park down the street. There's a wooden bench under an old oak tree. I sit there for a while, watching children play, mothers chasing after them with snacks. And sweaters. I used to be one of them, calling out, "Don't go too far," while he ran ahead, his laughter echoing through the air. Now I just smile. Watching others live doesn't hurt anymore. It reminds me that love continues, not always in our hands, but somewhere through someone else. Every now and then my son calls. Not as often as he used to, but enough for me to know he still thinks of me. The first few calls were awkward, polite, careful. We'd talk about the weather, the garden, his work. But after a while, his voice softened again. I could hear the comfort creeping back in, like sunlight finding its way through a crack in the clouds. Last week, he called just to tell me about a recipe Emily tried. You'd be proud of her. Mom, she made your peach pie. I laughed softly. Did it taste like mine? He chuckled. Almost. But not quite. It wasn't the words that mattered. It was the sound of his laughter. The warmth in his voice. The way he said Mom again, as if the distance had shrunk just a little. When we hung up, I sat there for a long time, smiling to myself. I didn't need to be in his house to feel close to him. Love once planted doesn't die just because it's moved to another garden. Sometimes on quiet evenings, I sit by the window and write letters I'll never send. Letters to him, to Emily, to the woman I used to be. In one of them I wrote, I used to think love meant holding on. Now I know it means standing still while the people you love walk forward. It's not weakness and it's grace. When I finished that letter, I folded it and placed it in a small wooden box. Inside that box are many things, old photographs, bits of fabric from his baby clothes, a dried rose from his wedding bouquet, and all the unsent words that live between us. It's strange. You spend a lifetime raising someone, and one day you realize your stories belong to different chapters, and that's okay. One afternoon while shopping in town, I ran into an old friend from church. Her name's Margaret. She looked surprised to see me. I thought you were living with your son now, she said. I was, I replied. But now I'm back, she frowned. What happened? I smiled softly. Nothing happened. Just life doing what life does. She nodded, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes. People always want to know the reason, the dramatic twist, the big moment. But most heartbreaks don't explode. They fade quietly like candlelight when the wick runs out. In the evenings I read. Sometimes poetry, sometimes old letters, sometimes nothing at all. Just sitting in the soft light, letting the quiet fill the room. I've started writing small notes to myself, taping them on the fridge. Don't forget the little joys. Tea tastes better when you're not in a rush. Let peace take its time. It sounds silly. Maybe. But it helps. There's something beautiful about learning to keep yourself company. To sit alone and still feel full. One night, while watering the plants, I looked up and saw the moon shining bright and round. The light fell across the old porch where years ago my son and I used to sit with mugs of cocoa, watching fireflies. I could almost hear his laughter again, high, young, pure. It made my eyes sting, but I didn't cry. Instead, I whispered into the night, "Thank you." Not to him, not to anyone, just to life. For all of it. The warmth, the ache, the lessons. Because even when it breaks you, love leaves you softer. A few weeks later, a small package arrived in the mail. There was no return name, just my son's handwriting on the label. Inside was a framed photo, me, him, and Emily from the wedding day. Beneath it was a note, "For your living room wall. You'll always be part of us. Love, Daniel." I smiled when I read it, not because I believed things would go back to how they were, but because I didn't need them to. I hung the photo by the window, where the light hits it just right in the mornings. Every time I walk past it, I whisper a quiet blessing. Be happy. Be kind to each other. Remember me gently. Months pass. The seasons change. The garden fills with life again. Birds nesting in the trees. Bees hovering over blossoms. Sometimes I sit outside with my tea, feeling the breeze on my face, and I think about how different this peace feels. It's not the peace of having everything you want. It's the peace of having survived what you thought you couldn't. There's strength in stillness. There's beauty in endings that don't need closure. I used to believe love was a circle, that what we give always comes back. But now I think it's more like a river. It flows away, it bends, it changes course. You can't stop it, but you can be grateful you ever stood in its path. Sometimes when I walk through the house, I still talk to him out loud. Daniel, I fixed the old lamp today. Daniel, I made your favorite pie, and yes, I burned it again. I laugh when I say it, because somehow it feels like he hears me. It's funny. I thought I'd feel empty without him here, but what I feel is quieter, deeper, like love has changed shape and become something that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. The last letter I wrote, the one I keep folded in the back of my journal, is for him. I'll read it to you because maybe someone listening needs to hear it too. My dear son, if you ever wonder how I'm doing, know this. I'm okay. My days are simple, my nights are calm. I miss you, yes, but missing you doesn't hurt anymore. It just reminds me that I once had something worth missing. I hope you treat her with gentleness. I hope she learns to love you in all the ways I once did, patiently, endlessly, quietly. And if one day you become a father and your child grows and the years carry them away from you, I hope you remember me and understand why I left without anger. Not because I stopped loving you, but because I loved you enough to step aside. I close the journal and place it on the table. The clock ticks softly in the background. The air smells like rain again, the same way it did the day he was born. I take a slow breath. There's no ache now, just peace. The kind of peace that comes after a long journey, not because everything turned out right, but because you finally stopped wishing it would. Later that night, I sit by the window. The rain has started again, gentle, steady, kind. The streetlights shimmer through it, casting golden ripples on the wet road. I think of Emily sometimes, not with resentment, but with quiet curiosity. I wonder if she understands now what it costs a mother to let go. Maybe one day she will. Maybe she won't. Either way, it's not mine to know. Life has taught me something simple. We don't always get to choose how our love stories end, but we do get to choose how we carry them. Some people carry love like a wound, reopening it each time they remember. I choose to carry mine like a photograph, soft around the edges, fading but never gone. So when people ask me, "Do you ever see him?" I smile and say, "Not often, but he's doing well." And that's enough because I don't need to be in his home to be part of his heart. I already live there, in the spaces memory never cleans out. Tonight, before I sleep, I whisper a quiet prayer. Not for them to come back, but for them to keep going. I close my eyes and the sound of rain fills the room. I picture him as a little boy again, running toward me with open arms, shouting, "Ah, Mom!" And for a heartbeat, he's there, warm, laughing, whole. Then the image fades and I'm left with the soft echo of that laughter in my heart. It's enough, it will always be enough.